Good afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and joining me for PodOps Hosting 101 training. I am Rob Winters. I am the founder of PodOps. Let me get my screen share up here, and then we'll do a couple of housekeeping items, and then we're going to jump right into the training. All right, so agenda's up on the screen. Just so everybody knows, we are live streaming this, meaning it will be recorded and will be available on demand on YouTube. So you can come back to this anytime on our YouTube channel, click the live tab, and then go ahead and watch as needed or skip to the parts that are most important to you. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. There is about a 60-second delay before I see those. I'll do my best to answer them on the fly, but if I don't get to them while we're going through the training, I'll answer those at the end, excuse me. So for today, what we're going to go through are the basics. So if you are brand new to PodOps or you're thinking about moving to the platform, we're going to go through how you create a podcast, how you import a podcast, adding your cover art, adding your first episode, customizing your episode players, and then we'll touch on the directories. The directories is a pretty big section, so we're not going to go through how to connect every directory because it would take too much time, but we'll go through the general principles. We will also be doing future trainings that are more customized and digging into specific areas like dynamic content, specifically the directories, sponsorships, and other tools. We also have added a page to our website under the resources section. So if you go to thepodops.com, mouse over resources, you'll find live trainings. Here you can find upcoming trainings. At the moment, we have a training scheduled in 2 weeks from today. That would be June 14th, I believe. We will do a PodOps Studio 101 training. So we'll go through all the basics of using Studio, meaning how to edit, record, create your content, and how to push it to hosting. And one final item while we're talking about Studio, if you haven't taken a look or heard about the release of Studio last week, we do have a promo right now if you decide to sign up for Studio as an add-on to your account with code 50Studio, all caps, you can save 50% on our annual plans. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off this. One moment. Make sure we got good crystal clear picture. All right, there we go. So if you are brand new to PodOps, you're going to register. That means you're going to be creating your account for the first time. This is where you would do that. It's pretty simple. You're going to put in your name, your email, password. You will check the box to agree to our terms and privacy settings and click create. The next screen is going to ask you to verify your email address. Until you verify, you cannot get into the system. So that is a requirement. The email is usually pretty quick, arrives within 60 seconds or less. If you don't receive it, do check your spam folder. If it truly doesn't come, there is a button on the screen to resend that to yourself. And if for some reason you don't get it, do reach out to support and we will help you with that. Once you have verified your email, or if you've already created your account, you're going to be coming to the sign-in screen. So our main URL is podopshost.com. You can get to all of these screens from here. You can see I've got my credentials preloaded. So we're going to go ahead and sign in. So when you sign in, you're going to land on the dashboard. So mine looks a little different than yours might if it's your first time logging in, meaning the subscriber, the total podcast, total sponsors, and gratuity earn, those are going to be 0 on day one, as well as your top episodes on the right. There's not going to be any data there because you don't have any episodes. But as you accumulate episodes, you publish more, you're going to be able to refer back to these statistics here on the right just for a quick glance, but you'll be able to dig in more in the analytics section. We won't get into analytics today, but you can always look at that in the future, as well as join us for a future training on that. So creating your first podcast, you've got two options. If you are brand new, you're either creating a podcast from scratch or you're going to import your podcast. If you're importing your podcast, this means you're coming from somewhere like Buzzsprout, Podbean, Libsyn, or one of the many other hosting providers out there. These buttons are quick action buttons here on your dashboard. They are the same actions if you click the left podcast button here that you will find in the podcast section at the top right. So import a podcast and create a new podcast. You will see I just got a setting at the bottom, privacy on this site. So we do have certain cookies that are tracking a few different things. You can read the details by clicking consent details here if you're ever interested, or you can close that out. You do not have to accept the cookies. That's up to you. And you can always change your settings in your profile. So here are my existing podcasts. On day one, this page is going to be blank. You don't have a podcast. So you're going to have to use your imagination here just a little bit. So let's go ahead and click create a new podcast in the upper right corner. I'm going to get a podcast pop up. So the first thing I need to do is name my podcast. I'm going to be very original. We're going to call it my first podcast. And then you need to select a plan. For this training, we're going to go ahead and put it on a free plan. With the free plan, your audio is there for 30 days after you create it. So that means the content I upload today will exist for 30 days, and then it's going to expire or be deleted. So I'll need to move to a paid plan in order for that to be on the platform permanently. As long as you're on a paid plan, or if you have a coupon like AppSumo that covers your plan, as long as that is input into the system, your content will remain permanently. It will not expire as it would on a free plan. So we'll select free, click create. The page is going to refresh. And you can see I have a new podcast title over here on the left. You'll see there's a note at the bottom of the podcast tile. We always remind you if you are on a free plan and count down those days before content's going to begin to be deleted. So that's always very visible, and you can upgrade your podcast at any time by clicking that button. But let's also import a podcast. So I showed you on the dashboard, you have the import button. You've got the import button here at the top. You've got it also here on the left. So we've kind of put it everywhere we can think that's going to make it easy for you to get access to it. Now I cheated. I have a RSS feed over here to the left, and I'm going to paste it in here. One thing to be aware of, I'm going to put a space here at the end of my RSS feed. This is the most common error we see people run into. They've got spaces here at the end of the feed and they don't realize it. Just make sure you hit delete. Make sure there's nothing after that final S on your RSS feed. Otherwise, you're going to get an error. It's not going to import for you. Hit search podcast. This is going to pull the podcast from whatever platform you're coming from. The things you want to check for is my title right? Is my name right? Is my description there? Now, this is pulling in the paragraph tags, the HTML. That's something that's specific to that platform. This is coming from Buzzsprout, so there's nothing we can really do about that. You have to clean it up after it imports. You also want to look at your episode count. This is very important on platforms like Buzzsprout, where you can mark your feed or certain episodes as private or lock them. Say you have 100 episodes and you're seeing one here, that means something is wrong on the other side of the hosting platform. So you need to go back to your original host, make sure your feed is not locked, make sure your episodes are public, then come back and import it. Hit import. You're going to see these two options if you're on the new plans. The first option is actually archived now, so you won't see that. The first one here is I'm going to import my podcast. I want to keep everything the same. So this name will stay the same exactly as it is. The second option is if you're going to import your podcast, but you want to give it a new name. So if I don't want to call it Rob's Podcast, maybe I'm getting creative, it's going to be Robert's Podcast, I can just rename it here. You can always do that later, but we're just putting it here so you can make the change as soon as you like. So we'll do option 2, hit import. This will take you back to the dashboard. Initially, it will say 0. If I refresh the page, we should see that count increase. There's my first episode. If you have really lengthy episodes, it can take several minutes for each of your episodes to upload. So you can go about editing the podcast. You can go into the manage section like we're about to and work on your podcast. You don't have to remain here while it imports the content, but you should come back and check every now and then, make sure it's still progressing. If you say have 100 episodes and it reaches 50, it's been there for a really long time and you're not seeing progress, it doesn't hurt to reach out to our team. Something we have seen with some of the hosts is their servers can time out and the content stops coming over. So sometimes we have to manually ping it, and that can help. So we're going to actually go into my first podcast here. This is the one I created a moment ago, and we're going to click Manage. When I click Manage, you'll notice all the navigation on the left changes. So as you move section by section, that's what you want to watch for. Your left navigation is updating, and everything you can do within that section is accessible to you. Within this section, anything that has a red asterisk on it, this means it's required for directory. So this is why we're forcing you to put these fields in. So things like your title, my category, the language, there are a lot of languages, the artist, who are you? We're going to use auto-populate, that's handy. Keywords, You can tell the things I'm typing. The keywords, this is for search engine optimization. So, what is your podcast about? If somebody went to Google or Bing and they were typing in keyword phrases, what would you want your podcast to appear on? This is that first step in connecting with your users. So, you can add multiple. I'm just going to put test. This is not very exciting, and we wouldn't put that in real life, but you can put up to 12 items and you can separate them by commas, and they can be multiple words per item. Your contact email, that's very important, especially for things like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, because they're going to send you a verification when you connect to the directory. If you have a fake email, we've seen users do this. They put in fake email addresses like one@one.com. You won't be able to connect to directories because they're going to send verification messages to that fake email. So please make sure you use a real email address. What's your podcast type? Is it episodic or is it serial? So, episodic meaning each episode is specific to one thing, or serial, think true crime. Am I telling a story over multiple episodes? The description is technically not required, but we strongly recommend you put it in. Apple, for example, if you leave this blank, your podcast is not going to get submitted to them. It'll likely fail or get kicked out. The directories are not all exactly the same on what they want from you. So that's why this one is hit or miss. We'll just put this as a test. If you have an external website, you can drop that in here to the website address. Episode limit, this is how many episodes you want to appear in your feed as you feed it out to individuals. And then, is it about a specific location? So when you're recording your podcast, I'm based in Baltimore. Am I talking about Baltimore? Does that matter? As well as your copyright. Do you want a specific something to appear after the copyright? You do not need to put the year in here. This automatically updates for you. So just put the text in. And last but not least, here is your content explicit. So are you cursing extensively? Do you drop a lot of F-bombs? You might want to put explicit on that for things like Apple. They do occasionally look at that and pull it, and you can't get your content pulled off their system if it is explicit under their terms and you haven't checked that. Locking your feed, this will prevent it. It's intended to prevent piracy or somebody from stealing your content, but it can also prevent somebody from uploading your RSS feed into another platform without your permission. And the last two items before we save this area are your podcast cover. This is the default cover, and your PodOps website banner. You'll see we have suggested dimensions on them. The reason we do 3,000 by 3,000 pixels for the cover size of your podcast, that's the minimum size for Apple to accept the cover. The number one reason podcasts we see get rejected from Apple's directory, the cover is too small or it is not square. They do not mess around with that. It must be 3,000 by 3,000 and it must be square. So we'll go ahead and click the red camera. I'm going to go ahead and grab my cover. I've got one here somewhere. We'll just grab this one, upload it, and then we're going to upload a cover as well for the back of the page. I don't actually know what I'm pulling here off of my page. Nope, see, and I grabbed an image that was too big, so it didn't work. So you cannot exceed the sizes for the site. You do have to stay within them or you'll get an error. And that image obviously is something I would never really publish, but there it is. The image in the back, the cover for your podcast website, we'll look at how you can also adjust that per episode in just a moment. But these are defaults, meaning if you don't want to customize it for every podcast, for every episode, you can just go ahead and set a default and you're good to go. Bottom of the page, make sure we save this. You'll get a success message at the top. If you don't save, the site is not going to force you to stay here. It will let you progress, but your content is not automatically saved. So be sure to click on that button. Next is the episode section. So because this is a brand new podcast, I don't have any content in here quite yet. So we're going to start by uploading our first audio episode. You can either click on the purple button here in the center to upload your audio, or you can drag and drop your episode into the area and it's going to upload. It depends how big your file is. It's going to take a minute or so to process that for you. Once it's complete, the screen's going to refresh and it's going to appear with all of the the editable fields for the episode that are available to us. And I picked a file that, of course, is going to take a minute on my internet connection. Let's refresh that. Let's pick a smaller file. And let's also pick a file that I can work with. That's a PFK file. Let's pick a WAV file. That's an actual audio file. So if you do pick the wrong file format, like the pop-up you just saw, it's going to tell you you can't upload that file format. If you have an audio-only podcast, it will not let you upload video. If you have a video podcast, it will let you upload audio or video, and both of those will work with your RSS feed. So similar to what we saw in the podcast info section, if it is required within here in the episode, it's required for the directories, meaning you must name your episode. It has to have a title. So this is my title, very creative. Show notes are not required for the directories, but strongly recommended. This is telling people what your episode is about. You can put links in here. Recently, there was a question on, can you embed a video? You can embed a video here. You'll need to switch into the code section, which means you can use the tools up here to paste like a YouTube video into the HTML. Where we would caution you with that is it is possible that Apple or Spotify, when they see that, it could break that episode because they're looking for text within this section, text and links. They're not looking for videos. So we can't guarantee if you're putting videos or images in your show notes or your transcripts, those are going to feed out to the directories correctly. They will work on your PodOps website, but just a caveat there. Again, we'll keep it high level. This is episode 1, season 1. What type of episode is this? Is this a full episode? For me, it generally is. Is it a trailer? Is it a bonus? These options more so are for Apple and the PodOps website. So if it's a bonus episode or a trailer, Apple can read that. Most of the directories do not acknowledge it, so they'll just pull the content in. If it is a bonus episode within your PodOps website, it is only available to people who subscribe. So that's something to keep in mind as well. We'll go ahead and mark it as full. And then here's the transcript section. If you have a transcript, again, we strongly recommend creating transcripts for your episodes. You can place that here. We auto-populate your name as the artist/guest for you. You can edit this. You can add additional artists and guests. And if you have a custom episode web page you'd like to link to with the show notes, you can put that here. Now, what that means is when this pulls into Apple Podcasts, it will include that link at the bottom of the show notes so somebody can click on it and get to your website. And then here you can schedule the episode. Now, this box for the date and time, it looks different with every browser. I'm using Chrome. So this is what it looks like in Chrome. If you use Firefox, Safari, it's going to look like the default for that browser. So this can be a little different for everyone. So don't be surprised if it changes, but you can pick any time in the future and it's going to schedule based on your time zone. I'm going to click Publish Now for some things we're going to look at in a moment. Again, we have a couple of options here. So say your podcast in general is not explicit. So we saw that in the podcast info section. You don't have to mark it explicit. But say this episode is explicit and you get, I don't know, really dirty or you get really into the cursing, here's where you can go ahead and just mark this one episode explicit so that that's clear to the directories. This episode's a little racy. You can also hide this episode from the RSS feed or directories. So if you have a private podcast, so you're doing classes, you're blocking it from external use, this can be really handy just to make sure it doesn't pop up in search or anywhere else. We'll go ahead and hit save. You can see here I have published my episode. Now I want to do one more thing. I'm not going to make you sit through me doing a bunch of episode creations, but we did recently add a feature that was requested when you're creating multiple episodes, and I can show that to you really quickly after this uploads. Scroll down here. So as you progress in your uploads, you'll see under the episode and season number, it shows you what you last input for your season and episode number. So the last number I used for my episode was 1. So this obviously is 2. I'm in season 1, so I can continue to use 1. These will progress with you. But again, this was user requested. We're just trying to make it very easy for you to know where you're at in your podcast. We're going to go back. We don't need to save that necessarily. Here, some things to know. I have an audio podcast. This is marked as audio. If this were a video podcast, it can also be video. The reason we note that is you can have audio and video in a single podcast, and those can both be delivered in your RSS feed to Apple, for example, and it will render them correctly. If it is published, draft, or scheduled, this will change for you so you can see that. And if you click your title, it will take you into the admin area of your podcast. Now, this is where you can change the cover image for your episode as well as the page. So if I click on the red icon and I click a new cover, I can update that. And I can click the red icon on the right and I can click a new image. And I've updated this. So I've now individualized the cover for my podcast and my page. The defaults in the podcast info section are still the default. So when I come back later and create episode 2, the defaults will appear and I can change them if I like. The analytics here, which are obviously 0 because this is a brand new episode, these are only available to you when you're in this view as the admin. Your end users never see this, but it's a quick view of how this episode is performing, and you can toggle between the show notes and transcripts. Here, you can also make this a private episode if you would like users to have to pay to get access to this. We're not going into the tipping functionality today. We'll do a later episode on that, but this ties into tipping. And one last thing on this page, if you're doing anything externally, you can utilize these external links to share your episode, as well as the MP3 link. If you happen to be really handy with HTML, you can create your own players with this link. All right, so let's go back. And on the left, we're going to go into the player section. Oops, I clicked the wrong button. Sorry about that. Let's go back into my podcast and my players. So within the players, you have a few things you can do here. You have the 4 boxes, and this is where I can select my content. Let me just select a few things here. The item on the left, the individual audio episode player, this is the embed code. If I have a WordPress site, a Wix site, a Shopify, whatever it is, if I want to take this code and drop a single player into that website. The episode on the right, or the item on the right, is an iframe. The difference with an iframe is, say your website's a little bit older or you have a really rigid WordPress template. Sometimes the iframe is more flexible with those types of sites because it's not quite as modern as the embed code on the left. For the items on the bottom, the multi-episode players, which we only have 2 episodes, so it's not that exciting. As you get to more episodes, this lets you show multiple on your website when you embed that player. So these don't render here. You do need to place it into a third-party site to see them, but they'll look just like the player we're about to look at when we click Customize Your Player. So it'll be a version of this, and I'm going to click on multiple episodes here at the top, and that'll add the multi-bar. It only shows 1 here in this section, but you get the idea. On the left here, we can change pretty much any color for the player. So by default, it leans into the PodOps purples and the grays. You can change your background. I'm just going to click through these. Ooh, that's really ugly. Something to also know about the color box that just popped up, that also will look different based on the browser that you're using. I know in Firefox, it looks more like a circular color palette with a few presets. Again, this is Chrome. Let's change the icons. I'm not doing any specific color, so don't judge how ugly this looks. We're just doing it quickly. And something that's important here is the sound wave bar versus the progress bar. So let me click forward. The top one, the sound wave bar, is the default color of your sound wave bar. The progress bar is the color the user sees as the episode plays. So you can see the kind of greenish color is the play, and the blue is the default. The multiplayer color is this bar here that's currently blue. Let's make it green. That will highlight the episode being played when the multiplayer is in progress. The episodes will continue to play through for the user one after another until they stop or pause them. And for users who have a private podcast, if you're embedding this on your site, you can hide the share and download buttons. So take a look over here on the right side of the screen. If I hide the share and the download, that is just one more way to lock down your episode and ensure that the content cannot be shared outside of your website. You can also hide the artwork if you don't want it there. The gap on the right here will not be there in the final version, but it appears there when you're here in testing. And text updates. So, because we know we have users who speak a multitude of languages on your PodOps website, we aren't able to dynamically translate season, episode, and the summary, those titles. Here, you can rename those anything you like. So, you don't necessarily have to say season title, season name, episode number, or summary. You can call them whatever you want in any language you want. So, again, we're trying to make that really flexible for you. I'm going to reset that because it's hideously ugly. But if you liked what you did, click save. It will publish immediately. It will update everything on your PodOps website as well as anywhere you have your players embedded. And you never have to update the embed codes that will automatically push out. And last but not least, let's take a look at directories here on the left. So within the directory section, these are all of the directories we are integrated within. And you'll find your RSS feed here at the top of the page. So it's always really easy to get to. One thing I will highlight is Podopolo. We have a partnership with them. So if you connect to them by clicking Get Listed, you get free access to the Go Pro version of Podopolo just by having a PodOps account. So even if you're on a free PodOps plan, you can get access to their paid account. Click on Connect Podcast. I'm not going to click on it because it will show you my password because I've already set it. But all it will do is ask you to create a password, and then your username is the same as your PodOps email. Download the app from the app or the Google Play Store, and you can start using their application. For the other directories like Apple, you can click Get Listed. Each of these pages has step-by-step instructions. So for Apple, for example, you click Launch Apple Podcasts. You do have to create accounts for these. So we're not going to go through each of these at this moment because it takes a lot of time, honestly, to go through each of them. So you got to commit a little bit here. But it'll take you through each of these. We have step-by-step information. You'll also find that your RSS feed is at the top of each of these pages. And after you connect the directories and they approve you, make sure that you take the URL they provide you and paste it back in the page at the bottom and hit save. This is what finalizes the connection between our platforms. So we make sure that we're sending them information and they send it back to us. And we also have a tool here for you, validate your RSS feed. If you click on this, it is going to open the Podbase page. It will preload your RSS feed. You can click go. It's going to go through and check everything for your RSS feed. So it's going to make sure your cover art's good. Let me see. So there we go. My cover art would intentionally fail. I specifically picked that. It'll go through everything in your podcast and tell you, is there something that's going to get you rejected by the directories? Yes, this is going to get me rejected. Apple requires, and they're actually going on the low side, Apple requires 3000 by 3000. Most of the other directories are happy with 1080 by 1080. So you'll want to make sure that you adhere to that. And they even have a link here for me to get to the Apple requirements. We've also got that in our support section. So again, we're trying to make sure it's very easy and seamless. This way, when you submit to a directory, you just get approved your first time and they're not giving you the runaround. All right. So that was a lot in 30 minutes, but as promised, we went through how to create a podcast, how to import a podcast. We looked at uploading our first episode, how to customize our episode cover. We looked at customizing the players, even though I made a really ugly player, and we touched on directories. Join me in 2 weeks as we dig into PodOps Studio. And if you have suggestions on which modules you'd like us to dig into next, feel free to email those to us or reach out via social media. We're on all the major platforms. And if you have any questions, you can reach out at hi@thepodops.com and we'll be happy to take care of you and help you out. Thank you all for joining me. It looks like we didn't have any questions in the chat, so I will let you go now. You guys have a great day.